The movie begins on Christmas Eve. We see Frank and Laura Harrington traveling with their children, Richard and Marion, along with Marion's boyfriend, Brad. They're all driving to Boston to celebrate the holiday with Laura's relatives. Frank isn't excited at all about visiting his wife's family, and on top of that, they're running late, which makes him extremely irritated. After several hours of driving through the night, all the passengers have fallen asleep. Frank tries hard to stay awake and focused on the road, but he starts drifting off too, causing the car to veer off the road. Thankfully, the family makes it out unharmed. Frank gets out to check if the car is damaged, and Laura suddenly realizes they're on a strange road instead of the usual highway. Nervously, Frank admits that he took a shortcut because he was struggling to stay awake on the main road. Once Frank makes sure the car is fine, he gets back behind the wheel and continues driving. Richard gets bored and starts making jokes and teasing Marion and Brad. Laura tries to calm him down and suggests they all sing Jingle Bells to distract themselves from the small arguments. Suddenly, Frank slams on the brakes and says he saw a woman dressed in white standing in the woods. Everyone looks around, but they can't see anything. Moments later, the woman suddenly appears beside the car. She has a wound on her forehead, looks like she needs help, and is carrying a small child. Frank tries talking to her, but she stays silent. Assuming she may have been in an accident, Frank gets out of the car to help her. Since there's no cell signal in the forest, Frank suggests they go back to the cabin they passed earlier to look for a phone. Frank asks his son to give up his seat for the woman, but Richard refuses to continue riding down the deserted road. Tired of the argument, Marion decides to get out instead and give her seat to the woman while she walks to the cabin herself. Laura tries speaking to the strange woman again, but the woman remains eerily silent. A little later, Richard notices a terrible smell inside the car, but Brad brushes it off, saying it's probably coming from the woman's baby, so no one pays much attention to Richard's complaint. When they reach the cabin, Richard immediately heads into the woods to relieve himself. Meanwhile, Frank and Laura go inside to check out the strange cabin. Brad stays alone in the car with the woman and tries to start a conversation with her, asking about her husband and child. When she still doesn't respond, Brad tells her that he plans to propose to his girlfriend tonight. What he doesn't know is that Marion, while walking down the road alone, is quietly repeating to herself that she wants to leave him. Eventually, Frank and Laura find a phone inside the cabin and try calling emergency services, but the line is dead. Suddenly, the strange woman finally speaks and says her daughter's name is Amy. Then she hands the child to Brad. Brad becomes confused about how the little girl can still breathe under such a thick blanket, but the woman smiles and says that Amy isn't breathing. Shocked by the woman's disturbing comment, Brad decides to look under the blanket himself. But instead of finding a baby, he discovers something horrifying and blood-red inside. Brad screams in terror, and Frank, Laura, and Richard all rush back to the car. But when they arrive, both Brad and the woman in white are gone. At the same time, Marion, who is still walking along the road, sees a black car drive past her. She spots Brad in the back seat desperately calling for help. Horrified, Marion runs back to her family and tells them that someone kidnapped Brad. The family immediately starts searching for him. Frank drives as fast as he can, but they don't see any cars. Suddenly, he stops the car, grabs a flashlight, and steps out onto the road, where he discovers Brad's body. The rest of the family catches up to him, and when Marion sees Brad, she faints. Richard carries his sister back to the car before returning to help move Brad's body. Laura tries calling emergency services again, but instead of hearing paramedics, she hears a woman's voice crying for help through the car. Laura attempts to wake Marion, but the girl remains in shock. Meanwhile, Richard and Frank drag Brad's body to the side of the road. Frank says it looks like whoever attacked Brad used an axe or a saw. He's also still deeply worried about the mysterious woman's fate. But Frank realized they wouldn't be able to help him there, so he suggested going to the police station instead. Laura considered turning back to the highway, but Frank was convinced they would reach the sheriff's office in about 15 minutes. Suddenly, Frank spotted a sign that said, "Market," even though he had never heard of the place before, and it wasn't on any map. With no better plan, he decided to head there. A little later, Richard noticed there was no one else on the road except them, and all the clocks had stopped at exactly 7:30. He found it extremely strange and assumed aliens might be behind what was happening, but his family didn't take him seriously. Suddenly, Marian, still not fully conscious, started singing the same song they had sung earlier, which terrified the entire family. Frank asked her to stop, but Laura said it might help her daughter feel better and started singing with her. Another 10 minutes passed with no sign of the market. Suddenly, Frank saw a black baby stroller in the middle of the road and stopped the car. Richard got out to check it and decided to prank his family by pretending something was pulling him inside it. After the prank, everyone got out of the car, but they found nothing inside the stroller. Laura asked Frank to admit they were lost and suggested going back, but Frank was convinced the market was very close and insisted on continuing the trip. Meanwhile, Richard tried talking to Marian, but she didn't respond and just stared blankly at one point. Frustrated, Richard got out of the car. Suddenly, the stroller returned to the road again, terrifying the family. Frank pushed the car aside, and they all got back in and kept driving. Laura noticed that during the entire trip, they hadn't seen any towns, hotels, or gas stations, which was very unusual. Frank assumed they were driving on a closed forest road, but that didn't comfort Laura. He turned on the radio, but instead of music they heard horrifying children's screams, so he immediately turned it off. He then blamed his wife for everything happening, since they were spending Christmas with her family. Frank's anger grew, and he desperately wanted to get out of this cursed road, but suddenly the car got a flat tire. At that moment, Marian admitted she was pregnant, and Richard said he had been smoking weed. Frank decided to calm himself and change the tire, while Richard went into the forest to smoke and relax. Suddenly, the strange woman appeared in front of him, bit his lower lip, and terrified him even more. After Frank finished changing the tire, he called Richard to come back. At that moment, the black car appeared again and this time abducted Richard. The family tried to chase it but couldn't catch it. Later, they found his body on the road, which shocked Laura so much that she began to lose her sanity. She ran toward her son and then told Frank that the real son wasn't Richard, but someone else named Rick Recon. Frank carried his wife, who had completely lost control, back to the car. After that, he and Marian emptied the luggage bag and placed Richard's body inside it. Marian decided to keep only the gun, which was supposed to be for self-defense. Frank and Marian returned to the car, while Laura had completely lost touch with reality. They passed the market sign again, but Frank was no longer sure they would ever find it, and he feared the strange woman would return. Frank remembered a story he had heard as a child about a couple who picked up a girl on the road, and it ended in a horrifying tragedy. After that, they heard a terrifying scream from behind them and nearly drove off a cliff, but the girl suddenly disappeared from the car. Later, they discovered that the entire family had died in a car accident in the same place. Marian asked her father if he thought the strange woman was just a ghost, but their conversation was interrupted when Laura, who had completely lost her mind, started eating obsessively. They had to stop again because she felt sick from overeating. Marian found the gun and thought it was a toy, accidentally firing it and injuring her father. She tended to his wound, and then they continued the journey. The girl blamed her father for drinking while driving, but alcohol was the only thing helping him cope. In the end, Frank wondered in disbelief why they still hadn't reached the market. Suddenly, Frank had the feeling that they were driving on a military road, and that the market might actually be a military base, which would explain why it wasn't on the map. Marian calmed down a little and fell asleep. After some time, she woke up to find the car stopped again and her father missing. She screamed and ran out of the car, but Frank was fine. He told her he had figured out they had been traveling west the whole time and were very close to reaching the sea, and therefore the market. Suddenly, Laura got out of the car and told Frank she knew he had betrayed her many times. Then she started seeing people in the forest and even inside the car. Laura kept seeing strange faces and believed they were waving at her, so she waved back happily and asked Frank to slow down. Suddenly, among those ghosts, she saw her friend Janine, who had died about 20 years earlier. Frank tried to convince his wife she was hallucinating and that there was no one in the forest, but Laura didn't believe him because she could clearly see Janine. Laura jumped out of the car and walked away, forcing Frank and Marion to stop and get out immediately to look for her, but they couldn't find her. Suddenly, they saw the same black car in the distance again. Frank got angry, grabbed the gun, and fired at it, but the car disappeared. Laura came back out of the darkness, badly injured with a large wound on her back. She kept talking as if nothing had happened, but soon fainted and began hallucinating, completely losing touch with reality. Frank was devastated by grief. He picked up the gun and almost shot himself, but Marion stopped him and begged him not to do it because she had no one else left. Frank lowered the gun and sadly said that the strange white woman would eventually come for Marion. Marion tried to reassure herself and her father that everything would be fine. She insisted they must continue without stopping so the strange woman wouldn't catch up to them. Marion took over driving, while Frank and Laura sat in the back. Frank kept drinking, but Marion snatched the whiskey bottle from him and threw it out the window, saying alcohol was only making his fear worse. Frank insisted they should have reached the coast long ago, but the market still wasn't in sight. Frank suggested they stop the car and walk into the forest to try to find a way out. They left the car and entered the woods in fear. Frank hit a barbed wire fence and then noticed a light in the distance. They followed it with hope, but were shocked to find themselves back at the car again. Frank became furious and noticed the car lights were on, even though no one had turned them on. When they checked, he realized Laura wasn't the one who had done it. Frank then started writing a list of things he wanted to do once everything was over. But suddenly, they stopped again, and found themselves back at the same wooden cabin where they first encountered the white woman. Frank ordered Marion to bring the flashlight, and went to inspect the cabin again. Suddenly, the strange white woman appeared behind him. Marion ran toward him screaming and pulled him back to the car. Frank suddenly remembered his whiskey bottle and exploded in anger when he thought Marion had thrown it away. He attacked her and hit her until she lost consciousness. When he realized what he had done, he quickly placed her back in the car. Then he saw the white woman heading into the forest, so he grabbed the gun and ran after her. A short time later, Marion woke up and saw terrifying shadows around the car. She heard a woman's voice outside saying that her father was already dead. Terrified, Marion tried to drive away, but the car ran out of gas. She was forced to continue on foot, and soon found her father's body hanging from a tree. She begged the white woman to stop tormenting her. Suddenly, she saw several bodies wrapped in black bags along the road. Then the black car stopped beside her, and the white woman appeared again, saying Marion was no longer needed. She got into the car and left. Suddenly, a bright light hit Marion from behind. When she turned around, she saw the crash scene again. After that, she woke up in a hospital. She had been in a coma for only a few hours. It turned out that Frank, while driving and falling asleep, had crashed into an oncoming car carrying a mother and child. Marion was the only survivor. The man who reported the accident thanked Dr. Eileen Morrow for everything she had done and offered to give her a ride in his black Cadillac. Meanwhile, workers were cleaning up the wreckage from the road, and they found a burned note from Frank. In it, he had written that he wanted to become the best grandfather in the world. This suggests that everything that happened on the road was not just hallucinations during a coma, but real. And that is the end of the movie. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel.